All right. So welcome, everybody. It's good to have you here for this discussion with Dr. Matthew Montgomery. And it's a wonderful opportunity to learn about what's happening with the high school. And I am going to, though, turn this over to Katie Anderson, our Director of Local Program.
Thank you, Bev. And I think this might be the first time Dr. Montgomery has spoken with us. So thank you, Dr. Montgomery, for your time. And I know the school year is very busy and election time is very busy. So we do appreciate it. And it's your days away from spring break. We're going to focus our discussion tonight on sort of three areas, and we'll let you sort of weave through them in an order that makes sense. Starting with mental health. We had mental health, especially in students, as a focus item a couple of years ago. And it's always sort of a topic that we're always interested in. So we've added that tonight for you to touch on that. Of course, shared services. We have a position in shared services, and it came out of, just to give everybody a little background, in 2018, we talked about doing a study on the consolidation of the two school districts, but we narrowed our focus the next year to refine that inquiry. And we started that inquiry with, does a transparent and cooperative process by the district and the boards of education in the shared services exist? And does public disclosure of the shared services arrangement offer opportunities of citizen participation and decision-making in important financial and education issues? So we took a year to study that, and we've come up with a position that any of these arrangements between District 65, 67, 115 should be reviewed regularly and demonstrate cost savings, educational benefits, and work efficiencies. And public reports should be available to inform the community of the scope and depth of intergovernmental agreements. So we wanted to, this is sort of our first catch up on the health of the boards and how those relationships are working. And then to swing to the final and perhaps larger topic, a voter services topic, information on the referendum. And so Dr. Montgomery, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Katie, very much. I'm going to try to touch on all of those topics. I will try to be as efficient as possible in my conversation and leave plenty of time towards the end for any individual questions you may have that I've elicited or that you had before you came tonight to join us. So as Katie said, we're going to talk about joys and concerns with the district, what we're celebrating, what we're concerned about. Mental health will be embedded in that section, as well as going back, hold on. As well as talking about shared services. I'll finish with proposed referendum and then ultimately end with your questions. So when I start looking about joys and concerns for 115, the recent as last year, recognition of the National Blue Ribbon was something that was not through any credit of my own. This was previous administration, but it should be celebrated. The administration, the staff, and the community, as well as the students, to achieve this high honor. I had the privilege of having a blue ribbon school at my previous district, and it is a tremendous amount of hard work, and academic excellence is at the core of achieving that national blue ribbon status. If I give you some key factors or some key factoids about 115, remember there's about 1,500 students at 115 currently. We have about a class size of 19, about 100 athletic or extracurricular offerings. And I will tell you that was something, it's still something today that I almost have to pinch myself that I'm a part of a district that has that many opportunities for kids. You don't see that on a regular basis across the state and more importantly, across the country. We have about 91% of our students participating in one of those extracurricular activities, either sports or extracurriculars, for example, clubs. And we also consistently are in the top 20 high schools in the state of Illinois. And you can see some of those other factors. The only other thing that I would add would be we're one of, I think, 86 or 87 districts in the state, in the country that have the AAA bond rating, according to Moody's. And if you look at three of them are right here. So one's Lake Forest High School, one is District 67, and the third one is Lake Bluff. So 3 of those 86 or 87 districts are within our communities. And the community should be exceptionally proud of that because it certainly affords us the most secure financial rating when you're looking at borrowing capacity. Last school year, about 150 community members came together to create a portrait of a learner for not only District 115, but 67 and 65. When I was interviewing 2 years ago, there was a charge for me to find ways to bring all 3 of those districts together, all 3 of those communities together. And one of the key ways to do that was through a portrait of a learner. 150 people came together between Knollwood, Lake Bluff, and Lake Forest, and we figured out the 6 competencies that we hope our graduates would possess by the time they matriculate through the kindergarten years all the way to the graduation stage. And those 6 are adaptability, citizenship, communication, confidence, critical thinking, and empathy. We used that portrait that we created last year to develop strategic plans. And the strategic plans were released last week and the week prior in both districts. So in District 67, the strategic plan was board approved last Tuesday, March 14th. In District 115, their strat plan was approved on March 7th. So both districts, and this is where they become autonomous at this point, have their own unique newly minted 5-year strategic plan. So you'll see from 2023 to 2028 at the bottom of the screen right now. The 3 goals that are in the plan for 115 are on the screen right now. And notice goal 1 is talking about knowledge, skills, and disposition. Goal 2 is talking about healthy and collaborative relationships. And goal 3 is talking about environments and facilities and resources to support our students. The goals then are broken down into objectives and ultimately strategies. And the thing that I'm most proud of this work, despite the fact that 50 people from each district came together to help author it, is that they will be actionable and measurable plans. So these will not be strategic plans that just sit on a shelf that collect dust. These are plans that are going to be tracking how we transform both of these districts respectively. Now, when I turn my focus to areas of concerns, one of them is the topic you wanted me to talk about, which is mental health and mental health and social emotional learning, really, of how our students are doing. And if you know, if this is a topic on your radar, I'm sure you know that last year that the American Academy of Pediatrics declared a state of national emergency in children's mental health. And the CDC recently also reported or shared a report that said the same thing. So they were alerting the state of mental health for the country's youth. This is maybe was always present, but in a post-pandemic world, it has been elevated. So our concerns in this area of how our students are, their overall well-being is certainly a laser focus, and even more so after the pandemic or the tail end of the pandemic. Obviously, we're taking these warnings very seriously. We have a robust level of structures and support for students, from teachers, counselors, social workers, psychologists, who all work tirelessly to support our students. Just last month or this month, I can't remember, they're running together. We announced that the board and I have asked for an independent expert, Dr. Daniel Cates, to review our resources and identify our areas of strength and future opportunity. We're partnering with Dr. Cates because I wanted an outside set of eyes to come in and look and see through interviews of community members, parents, guardians, students, about how they think we're supporting them in this area. And then he will ultimately generate a report for myself and the board where we can review and determine what we need to do moving forward as a educational community who are working to support our students' mental health needs. I also would be remiss if I didn't say that we have the benefit of some amazing community partners such as and LEAD works with us on an ongoing basis to help support our students in terms of mental health. If I move on to other areas of, I'm not going to call them concerns as much as I'm going to say clarification. So there's been some conversation in the community around how our students are performing, and they've been using the 2021-2022 Illinois State Report Card. So the screen you see right in front of you right now is our English language arts, and orange is, just to give you some clarifiers, level 1 is orange, partially meets standards, yellow is approaching standards, green is meets, and dark green is exceeds. The next screen I'll show you is for mathematics, and you can see on that that the same levels exist, but you can see how we distribute on those different rankings. It's deceiving in that when you look at the numbers, you could make an argument that 61% of our students are meeting or exceeding the standards, but you need to put that in context with how we're performing within the state and what the state college readiness requirements are. So, for example, the average percentage of an English language arts exam meeting state standards for college readiness is 30%. We're at 61%. Is that as good as we can be? Absolutely not. But I want you to pull out a little bit when you're thinking through this and see how we rank relative to our peers to give us a better indication of how we're meeting students' needs. So the 61st percentile in ELA puts us in the 99th percentile in the state. 64% for math puts us in the 99th percentile for the state. And you can see number 6 for ELA and number 3 in the state for math. So while we are far from perfect, as evident that we have brand new strategic plans that identify how we're going to continue to grow, the idea that I want to reassure people that we are a national blue ribbon school and we are doing a great job preparing our students for the future. In terms of continuous improvement along what's coming out of the strategic plan work, one is making sure that we are doubling down on our SAT and PSAT prep. So this is ensuring that our students have the skill set they need to succeed on these tests. We are not a test prep school. That is not what we're all about, but we still want to make sure we prepare students for a world of testing that they are going to continue to see in the collegiate environment. We are also working on updating our curriculum based on the new strat plan, offering new professional development, and continue looking for ways to expand the extracurricular activities or opportunities that we are offering our students. All of these fine details will come to life as we embark on the new strategic plan that will be in full force for the start of next school year. Let me go back one. And let me move to shared services now. So that was the end of topic 1. Topic 2 is an update on shared services. Before I get into the nitty gritty, I just want to share that one of my first goals and one of the first interview questions that I was asked 2 years ago was, we need you to evaluate shared services. At that time, they decided to hire 1 superintendent versus 2. So they made a commitment for 3 years to hire, they being the boards, to stay shared services. And one of my goals was to evaluate shared services in my early tenure. I have done that almost to an obsessive point to figure out where we wanted to be and the benefits of this process. And I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. This is not a new idea. So when you think through how long we've been doing this, in 2024, we will celebrate the 20th anniversary of a shared service agreement. So I have done an exegesis. I'm in support of shared services. I'm going to tell you a little bit more why. But now that we're at the 2-decade mark, I think that it's time for us to start annually reporting on the benefits and sharing out with the community of the why behind this every year, but also then moving past this as a community knowing that this is how we do our business, and there's benefits that people can easily recall or recite of the why behind it. I don't think, from my vantage point, that we have done an exceptionally good job in the past of sharing the story of the why behind it and what the taxpayers are benefiting from this type of agreement. So one of my commitments was not only assess it, make a recommendation to the board, which is to stay shared services, but then to start instituting an annual shared services report. And the first one will be released in April of this year. So this is year 2 of my tenure. Last year I assessed. This year I'll be providing annual reports. And I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek of that report that will be coming out first in 115 on April 11th, and conversely on April 25th for the 67th board. At this point, because we've been doing it so long, after 20 years, we don't run what ifs of what it would save anymore. Now the scenario, because after 20 years, is what would it cost us to separate? So I want you to think through that lens, because it would cost us money to break apart. So how much money is that? So approximately $1.3 million in personnel alone would be needed to separate the districts. Additionally, another $500,000 in technology services alone. So now we're at like 1.8, and then a minimum of 13 other shared service contracts that we have used economy of scale. So we think of the website contract. So we have a website contract, both districts go together. We get the benefit of negotiating that 2 districts together instead of 1. All of those would have to be renegotiated to respective districts. And then District 67 does not have administrative spaces. We are sharing the 115 spaces for for shared services personnel. So we'd have to also build out or recapture space in District 67. As an example, the admin wing for District 67 before it came together in 2004 was in a portion of the 5th grade, 6th grade library in Deer Path that is now called the Cube, and it is a collaborative learning space for our students. We don't have that space anymore. They would have to find it. So a minimum right here of 1.8 in just tech and personnel, and then all of the ripple effects with additional space and contracts that right now we are able to reinvest in other elements of the district. The web is so tangled at this point, and the benefits are so clear to me as I've studied it for 2 years. The thought of pulling it apart is going to be exceptionally costly to the taxpayers, because right now, instead of the most senior level positions being 2 of them, you're paying 1 of them. So if you look at, let's look at Highland Park and Deerfield. They have an elementary superintendent for Deerfield, an elementary superintendent for Highland Park. They have a high school superintendent. So they are paying for 3 superintendents as taxpayers, where you are paying for 1 if you're in Lake Forest. Remember that if you're in Lake Bluff, you're paying for the elementary superintendent as well as LFHS. Other benefits that I would highlight, if I go here, so if you look at technology, we merged our technology support. So the service providers, we would have to pay for separate experts in opposite districts. So I'd have to borrow people from 115 and pay them, and borrow people from 67 and pay them based on their individual expertise, based on what I was needing. Let's think of wireless, think of networking, think of hardware repair. With that department now merged, those personnel can service both districts uniformly and benefit with a more robust service provider to meet the needs of all of our students K through 12 now, because that department is shared. Teaching and curriculum, the fact that we have 1 portrait, the fact that our strategic plans were released simultaneously and they hang together, and that they can work on similar things even though they have their own uniqueness as individual districts, is a value add for students as they move through the curriculum. And then communications, the ability to communicate in both districts with one communications department is certainly to the benefit of the community. So they know what's going on in both of those scenarios in both 67 and 115. Safety and security. We just ran audits for safety and security, and one of the byproducts of that audit from an external source was a shared director of safety and security over both districts. We are going to be posting that position in April. So instead of having one director of safety, it's 115 and one in 67. We will have a shared director that will help our students get the protocols and the training that they need in the elementary and have them transfer to similar protocols and training that they would need as they go to high school. I think it will increase the overall safety that our students and our staff will be offered because of this type of synergy, because of a shared service environment. Facilities, we have one director of facilities, and that's Dan Mortensen. And he is leading and overseeing the projects in both 67 and 115. There's projects happening right now independent of the referendum, and Dan being able to see and have a foot in both districts elevates the continuity of the experience for the students and the staff. Now to my third and final topic, which is the referendum. And I know I'm packing a whole bunch in there, so when we get to questions, feel free to jump around based on any of the three topics. With regards to the referendum, this has been taking a great deal of time. Hopefully you know what it is and you know that it's on the ballot on April 4th. There's the mayor debating us, folks. There's some stuff going on in these communities right now. The referendum itself, if I were boiling it down to two key reasons of the why behind this work, it's to protect the asset that we have. So we have an 88-year-old historic building that's ranked one of the 20 most beautiful campuses in the country. We need to protect that. We need to make sure that it stays open for the next 20 or 30 years. We also need to finish what we started. So in 2006, when the district passed the $54 million referendum, which is $80 million in today's dollars, $79 million in today's dollars, there was an understanding with that board and that administration that they are only touching in 2006, right? Forgive me, 2006. They were only touching 50% of the classrooms. And it was known at that time that they would be coming back to taxpayers in 15 to 20 years to finish the project. I walked into a scenario where we're at 17 years, 18 years from when that happened. And now we need to finish what we started and finish the work in that classrooms we didn't touch, and then also repair and ensure that the infrastructure keeps the building open for the next, like I said, 20 or 30 years. You'll see it's an infrastructure referendum. It's $105.7 million. That's a lot of money, folks. I'm not going to minimize it. It's over 100. There's a sticker shock that comes with this size of a referendum, and I will never minimize that for you. But know that this does not include nice to haves in this $105.7 million. This is what we need to make sure that the building opens. So much so that the project started out as 200 million, then it went to 160, then it went to 140, and where we landed was 105.7. It's all infrastructure. So the right side of the pie chart is infrastructure that's not glamorous. It's infrastructure you may not see. But without it, we wouldn't have HVAC that's working, electricals that are working, mechanicals that are working. So in other words, without that side of the pie chart, you wouldn't have a building that was open. The other side of the pie chart is infrastructure that's happening in classroom spaces. So think of the science labs, think of the classrooms, think of the student services hubs, think of new furniture. All of those things are how do you improve the infrastructure within the classroom setting that wasn't touched in 2006. All of it is infrastructure. All of it is needed. So much so that if the referendum were to go down, of course, I'm not hoping for this, and we had to put it back up on the ballot in the presidential election, we wouldn't cut the project back down from 105.7. It would actually go up to whatever the escalation cost is over the next 2 years. And right now, our construction firm is estimating an 8% escalation cost per year. So that means the presidential election would turn a $105.7 million project to a $120 million project. And we will have not gotten anything else for that money. So I don't want people to think that the board designed the project so that we could take 2 bites at the apple and we would say, well, if it goes down the first time, then we'll just scale back. We scaled back beforehand because we didn't believe that this community would support us baking in nice to haves or frill. That's why you see nothing, you don't see a huge addition or change to the natatorium or their pool, or you don't see a great deal of investment in the auditorium. You don't see a great deal of investment in turf or athletic enhancements. We are classrooms and infrastructure that keeps the building open. That's how the project came together. So what does it touch? It touches maintenance and infrastructure, safety and security. So this is the things you don't like to talk about. So if you have an active shooter at the high school, which I hope never happens, in this project, we'll be able to add a rapid lockdown system, door sensors at all exterior doors. We'll be able to partition the building off because we want to slow down any intruder's ability to move through that building, and every second counts in these types of scenarios. ADA accessibility, you talked a little bit about that in the intro or before I started. But right now, the building is ADA compliant, but it is not, I would say, not ADA efficient in terms of if a student or a staff member goes on crutches, it's not going to be an easy plight for them. If a student is in a chair or a staff is in a chair and they're always in a chair, it is not going to be the best user experience as they're navigating through that 88-year-old building. If they're going to the restrooms, if they go to the drinking fountains, if they need to be in a lab environment in a science classroom. Is it compliant? Yes. Is it what I think the expectations are for this community? Absolutely not. And this project will help ensure that our students with all types of abilities get the experience that we would expect for every one of our students. I touched on science labs, but I just want to build on that. About $15 million of this project is to renovate the science labs. The science labs are out of the 80s. So if you look at our middle school at Deer Path, look at Lake Bluff Middle School, those science lab environments are leaps and bounds more advanced than what we're offering our high school students right now. Those spaces just haven't been touched in 40 years. That doesn't mean the curriculum hasn't improved, the instruction hasn't improved and evolved, but it does mean the space in which these labs are being done is largely inadequate when you think of what they're experiencing in the middle school, and then ultimately, if they go into the sciences and they go into the high school or the college environment, what they'll be exposed to. So we want to make sure that we are preparing them accordingly. When I move on to how much this is going to cost, and that's always a hot topic issue, we broke it down a couple different ways. One way was in $500,000 increments, and the other one is on $1 million house. But on the website, you can scan this QR code. You can get a tax calculator on the website that'll give you all of the information that you need to calculate whether you're a business owner, a homeowner, homeowners, that maybe you have more than one house in the community, or you have a combination of business and home. You can type in exactly how much your business or home is worth, figure out what your exemptions are, and then at that point, it'll spit out exactly how much you need to be paying, or what you would be paying after you enter your fair market value. It is about $79 per month for a home value at or around $1 million, so $950 per year. There are some houses in this community that are 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. There's some that are under $1 million. So that's why we urge people to go to the tax calculator to figure out exactly what their individual impact is going to be. When I talk about this slide, I try to help people. While it's a lot of money, I want people to keep it in perspective. And I use a couple different analogies. One is that you're not going to go out to dinner for a dinner of 2 in Lake Forest under $79. And that's just where we live, folks. My Starbucks bill is another one I use. I spend more than that a month in Starbucks, and I'm getting black coffees. large black coffees. That doesn't mean it's not a lot of money, and that doesn't mean I'm not asking a lot, and I'm not acknowledging that I'm asking a lot. I'm just asking for perspective as we think about what the cost of things are to keep this building up that the community loves for 20, 30 years or more. And I think I get to take a break, allow you to take some questions, hopefully get a sip of water. So the three topics that I touched on were the joys and the concerns, a quick touch in on shared services, and then finish with the referendum. I'm happy to answer questions on any of those to the best of my ability. If I don't have the answer, we will circle back and provide them to you via email.
Yeah. If I may just comment on the mental health challenges. And I think I saw Lori Rose, I think you're on as well, and feel free to comment as well. Lori and I started about 10 years ago, just attending meetings with the district. And right off the bat, we knew that there's a shortage in the community for healthcare professionals. And I can say the school probably picks up a lot of the burden of providing mental health care services. And I feel for you of what the burden is. It'd be interesting to see what Daniel Cates says. But I will just from your personal experience say that this is something that we've been working on in the community with Northwestern, and how can we get more professionals in the physical geographical area of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, that families may call upon and not just rely on the services of District 115 and 67.
I'll tell you that we, one of the reasons that I wanted to get the audit is that we are running the equivalent of a mental health clinic out of that building. Yeah. And I want to make sure that we are meeting our students' needs and our staff needs, and that we are also making sure that we're ensuring all the response. I mean, that's a tremendous responsibility. And since 2012, since the student suicides that we experienced in the community, we built out that program to the point where I am confident that we are able to meet the needs of our students in the classrooms and outside of the classrooms. Now we're fine tuning to make sure that we are fully ensuring that we're reporting, that we're documenting, that we're following the best practices. And I thought that an external audit would be the best way to reaffirm the good work we're doing, and also to help ensure that if we need to dial anything up or dial anything back, Dr. Cates will help us do that.
Yitka, go ahead, just jump in.
Sorry, wasn't quite sure if you wanted to continue, Katie, but I do have a quick follow-up question. So the external mental health consultant, will that include conversations with students, or is he more going to look at resources and what is being offered? And the reason really why I'm asking this is I read the recent article in the Forest Scout about a student, LGBT+Q student, reporting pretty steady bullying and homophobic behavior. As part of that Forest Scout article, there was a survey included, and you could click on the survey and it gave you results without participating in the survey. Now, again, it wasn't quite clear if you could answer the survey several times. Was the survey just to readers of the article? So the survey numbers are anecdotal, I would say, but the survey numbers, when I clicked on it, said that 48% of survey participants reported pretty steady, ongoing homophobic behavior. I don't want to single out that population, but I do think among students there are ongoing mental health challenges. And so I was wondering if Dr. Cates is going to look at that as well, or if it's really more resource assessment.
No, it's going to be everything. It's going to be resources and students, student interviews, staff interviews, parent interviews, community interviews. it is going to be a complete analysis of all levels of special education, counseling, social work. And to your point, the LGBTQ plus population continually shows the greatest amount of need on our culture surveys that we do for the state.
Mhm.
So the CSEI, the Illinois Youth Survey, we're getting data real time that the LGBTQ population continues to be marginalized. This is the latest string
Yeah.
of issues that we had just in the last 2 weeks. It's been a pretty rough 2 weeks, to be quite candid with you. And the students will be included. To answer your question, the students will be included.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Stephanie, you want to comment?
Sure. Of course, I just want to comment on facilities. Because right now we've got work or plan work going on that is not that bond, the 105 bond will not touch, correct? That's already in the 15 million.
For those of you who don't know, we borrowed $15 million. And this was last year to spend $5 million last summer, this summer, and the following summer on critical need stuff that couldn't wait on a decision of a referendum. So that work, some of the work was done last year. And then, for example, the windows on the east side of the building, I think, are getting replaced. They were supposed to be replaced last year. Some of those are screwed or nailed shut. And they're getting replaced this summer. There was a 52-week lead time on those windows. But yes, Stephanie, to your point, the 105.7 does not include the 20 million or the 15 million we borrowed. That 15 million will be just paid out of general fund.
Right. So I just wanted to bring that up. And then really I have a concern from the
Tell me
get.
why did you want to bring that up?
Just to let people know that one work is going on and that money has been already 50, it's really 15 in my mind, 15 plus the 105.
You're absolutely right.
And
I'm glad
then,
you're bringing it up. I just want to know, so I didn't want to assume why you're bringing it up.
okay. And one thing is, so we've budgeted for, because in my mind, we've just budgeted this 105. I've asked for, construction documents and, I don't think it's there yet on some of the stuff. So what if the 105 million isn't spent? All of it.
We have.
I mean, you're just getting rough estimates.
Yeah, so it has to be spent. So one, it has to be spent on capital improvement. It can't be spent on any type
Right.
of general operating funds. If there is, let's say the market rebounds and the estimations are under what they thought, that's actually a perfect world. I would hope for that. And we would start looking at projects that were left on the drawing room table, so to speak.
Right.
That we could add into from our wish list. I did the same thing in the $87 million project I ran in Ohio, where we had just a list of things that just got cut off because we didn't think that the voters could support a higher level of a referendum. We kept that list and we just started picking them off. Thankfully, they just finished in Ohio because the buildings that we opened the last set were in 2020 before I moved, actually. They have hit every wish list item. That was in a pre-pandemic world. I'm certainly not making that promise now, but that's what we would do. You
If there
cannot
was a
leave
surplus.
money on the table and you cannot spend it on general funds.
Okay.
And then
Maureen?
how
Yeah.
competitive, I saw that you once again, Lake Forest has a love affair with Pepper Construction. And it is a gripe of mine that to me, it wasn't competitively bid out that contract. I think also for the architect, we haven't competitively bid that out as well. And there's a lot of great school architects that I've made mention to the board over the years. What is it
I
that,
unilaterally disagree with you on both of those statements. Like I
okay,
care about you, but I unilaterally disagree on both those.
okay, go for it.
So, I mean, and Jen's not with me right now, but Jen can give you and this is Dr. Jen Hermes, she can provide subsequent of when both of those processes were competitively bid and when the boards wanted to reaffirm not only Perkins in the past, but Pepper. I don't have a love affair with anybody except for my bride, but those processes were, and my children, I'll say my children too. Those processes were completely vetted in the past, and I can provide the process that went through those. I do not think we're just staying with them just because, and I don't think it's.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, over the years before you, I don't know, I would disagree with that thought. I'm just gonna let it go for now. But it's just how schools go out to bid is, we don't get the best vendors, and I'll leave it at that. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Lori?
This is the finance and ops conversation. This is why it's good to have Stephanie there, because she is bringing critical lenses to make sure that we're able to go through these conversations. So know that our banter back and forth, it is a true partnership, and I value her voice at the table.
Thanks, Katie. I have two questions. The first one on mental health, the second one on the referendum. My mental health question is, we've seen some rumblings in the community, and I know that nationally, it's an issue that's been litigated in many directions in court about the autonomy of young adults who are not the age of majority. So I was wondering if your study of the mental health issue in our schools will address the issue of autonomy and privacy for young adults who might come to school psychologists or social workers with concerns that they haven't shared with their parents. I don't have a current student in high school, so I'm not familiar with consent forms or things like that, but is there any thought being given to studying this more broadly so that students can feel that school might be a safe space when they have no other safe space?
So there are protections that's a great question. And I can't cite the Illinois code for you right now, but know that there are protections for students to be and this is a rub. So we try to partner with our parents and our guardians to the best of our ability while protecting our students with scenarios that I think you're referring to. But there is the ability per Illinois law for students to meet without parents aware of the meeting to discuss confidential, self-disclosed confidential stuff from the student that's already outlined in the law. So are we looking at expanding what's already afforded to them? No. Are we looking for ways to make sure that we are still being transparent with our parents, partnering with our parents, and still protecting our kids? Yes. And all of that is being looked at. I want to know first and foremost that we are in compliance with the law, and then educating parents, because some parents don't know that students can meet with social workers without them knowing for X amount of visits before the parents have to disclose. That is a real problem for some parents and guardians, and I understand that perspective, but I think as a community, we need to do, I'm taking responsibility. We need to do a better job educating our parents of what is permissible through the law, how we're not going above and beyond it, and how we are demonstrating a partnership with parents, even if they are sharing information, because I know that for a fact that our social workers or our counselors, even in those trying situations, will try to elicit a conversation with the parents and try to encourage students to partner with their families.
Thank
What
you.
was the second question?
Okay, so my second one I haven't stated yet. I'll
Yeah.
try to. The bond market is currently in a state of volatility and upheaval. Assuming the referendum passes, are you going to, is the plan to go out with the whole 105 all at once, or would you perhaps consider doing tranches so that if rates are more favorable, you could finance some of this at a more optimal time, saving the taxpayers some money?
I love that question, and we've got it a couple times. It is unlikely. Our municipal advisor is Liz Hennessy from Raymond James. She will be studying the market to see when the most advantageous time it is to pull. I will tell you that it is likely that it will be in two pools or two packages, because this work is going to happen over 4 years. So we will look at the market, look at the construction that could be done. You have a 3-year window once you pull the money. So all of those variables will be interplaying to try to maximize the tax benefit. The $79 per month on $1 million house is the worst case scenario. That's if we were to pull all of the 105.7 at once, knowing that we probably won't. But in the spirit of full transparency with the community, we needed to show them what the worst case scenario is. and that's $79 per month for $100 or $1 million house. I also want to note that the last payment of the 2006 bond is at the end of 2026. It was a 20-year borrow. So in 2027, the tax rate on $1 million house will decrease by $410. So you'll have a decrease in 2007. You'll have an increase of some portion of $79 per month based on the pool rate that we do, likely in 2 different pools. So you could have half of it happening right now, right when we pass the referendum, and then a hold. You could have the decrease in 2027, and then that backfilled with a new one to kind of flatten the curve, so to speak. So the impact is not as great on the taxpayer.
Emily, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Montgomery, for being with us tonight. I have 2 questions. The first one is a short one, but they both have to do with special education. What's the percentage of students with disabilities that are enrolled in the high school? And 2, could you give an example of the better integration of instructional spaces for special ed that I saw on your presentation slide?
So I'm going to start looking up as you're talking, I'm going to be looking up the rate for special ed because I don't want to misquote it for you.
Okay.
As I'm looking it up, I'm going to talk to you about the environment or the way we provide special ed, because it is unique, and it was unique for me coming from Ohio. It is almost a full inclusion model that we are striving for in District 67 and 115, and you'll understand that from your background. But we do very little outplacements intentionally. We partner with the Maryland Coalition of Special Education, and we are leading the North Shore in terms of the fewest amount of outplacements. So those of you who don't know the special education lingo, there is the ability to outplace a student to an alternative educational setting, or you can keep them within the traditional school setting and provide services within the classroom. In both 67 and 115, the previous administration worked tirelessly to build out supports within the classrooms so students with all types of abilities can stay in a full conclusion or inclusion model, provide additional supports within the classroom, and then get exposure. The students with additional support needs get exposure to the rigorous curriculum while receiving the supports within the classroom. So that is something that I will tell you has been a focus for the last probably 5 or 7 years. The students right now with IEPs is 13% in 2022, according to the latest report card.
Thank you.
You bet.
Chris?
I'm glad I rambled on long enough where I could look that up simultaneously while I was rambling. So that is accurate data, I promise.
Chris, go ahead.
Chris, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Hi there. Okay. Dr. Montgomery, Chris Newman, thank you so much for coming tonight and giving us all this valuable information. My question is regarding the referendum. You stated that in the 105 million, that the pool and the auditorium and other sports enhancement areas are excluded. Because you said you just didn't think the public would support based on a poll that those additional costs. So it could very well be that in 10, 12 years, those one or all of them, or many of them would come up for needing repair, updates, improvements. And if in fact the plan is not to put that in 12 years on another additional referendum to the people, have you planned, have you thought about, has it been researched on how you would come up with the funds for those areas that are not covered on this referendum?
It's a great question. And I would like to tease out another one, but let me just stick to this one first. where we're looking for auditorium, natatorium, athletics is for private-public partnerships. So are there, did we just lose? The screen's just, oh, there you are, Chris, sorry. Somebody signed off and the Brady Bunch moved and I couldn't see you. I found you again. We would look for, one idea is to look for private-public partnerships for things that we are not, were the nice to have. So the auditorium and the natatorium, because right now they're functional, but there are improvements that some subsets of our community really feel like need to be improved. And we would look for, are there partnerships within the community that would do it above and beyond the referendum? That's one idea. So I also did that in my previous district where we had people wanting to build a whole nother full-size gymnasium. We cut it out of the project because we didn't feel like we would get the support. So we looked at private donations to build that, and they fundraised that information because that money because they thought it was that important to them. If you're looking for critical failures, we would be pulling that out of general fund to do those improvements, and we would have to account for it accordingly. But it is unlikely that in the next 10 or 15 years, we're going to be putting in a brand new auditorium. I think that's just out of the scope of what we would do. And I do not think that in 15 to 20 years, they could put a referendum solely for those things. I think we would have to bake it into general operating. And here's where I want to tease that question out just a little bit. The board is having real conversations right now of, do we want to maintain the philosophy that was in 2006 and before, which was every 15 to 20 years, we come to our tax base and ask for a large sum of money.
Yeah.
That's not what I want. And I don't think it's what this current board wants, but it's going to require a change in philosophy because that was the philosophy in 2006, very much so. They explicitly said it. I don't think that's what our community wants. And there's different ways to approach that. Right now, we spend $1 to $1.5 million in capital improvement every year. If you would want to invest year over year, you'd have to increase that line item to build up reserves so you didn't have to do a bigger amount or do any amount at all. But if I move that line item for 1.5 million to 3, 1.5 million to 5 or more, that money is going to have to come from somewhere, and it will likely come from programs. So then you have to have the reconciliation with the community of what programs stay, what programs get dialed back. How do you manage the 75% of the budget that's humans? Remember, we're not in a widget world, we're in a human world. Where when I say we need to save money, it's coming from that 75% of the budget, which is staff, which is tied to programs and extracurriculars and interscholastic sports. The other funding mechanism is a debt service extension base, which some districts have, 67 has, we don't have. And that would require voter approval, and that allows you to borrow in chunks where you don't have to go to the voters. Stevenson has this, New Trier has this, and it was based off of change in legislation in 1992 that whatever debt you had on your books, you could use essentially a credit card limit that you can borrow in increments of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So for example, District 67, that's the reason we don't have to go on the ballot in 67, because we have a $500,000 DSEB or debt service extension borrow that we can borrow in multiples of 1. So we can go out for 5 years and borrow 500,000, we can borrow 2.5 million. Or you can go after 10 years and borrow 5 million. And you don't need voter approval to do that. That would take something on the ballot. I market researched that one last fall because I thought that was something this community might like. Like if we lowered the 105 million and said, okay, I'm going to ask for $50 million in cash, but I'm going to ask for a DSEB that will fill the gap between the 50 million and then ensure we never have to go back on the ballot again. When I market tested that, the community said absolutely not. And by absolutely not, I mean like 40% or lower. And when the researchers asked why, the response was we don't want to give the school district an open checkbook because we don't trust them financially at this time. So I think that if we were ever to go for a DSEB again, we have to, one, after this referendum, demonstrate transparency and coming under budget or on budget and on time. And then we have to demonstrate the need that we don't want to do this year over year. Simultaneously, while looking at our overhead costs, reducing it, and investing it in capital improvements, that line item is increasing year over year to also demonstrate fiscal responsibility. It's, Chris, the question you asked is multi-layered and then some, but it's a great question because it begs to wonder what the philosophy was, what the philosophy is, and what the philosophy will be in the future. Now I'm going to give you one more example. Last week in District 67, I made the recommendation to reduce Mandarin. So I said, I think we should reduce Mandarin from 67. The enrollment has been slowly declining over 10 years. We have attrition from kindergarten to 5th grade, where you have a staff and resources that are being underutilized, and our families are saying that they no longer want Mandarin. I made that recommendation. There was 50 to 100 people that showed up to the school board. There was a huge case that said we can't live without Mandarin. The board ultimately agreed with the community, which is well within their prerogative, but we're maintaining Mandarin for next year. I am committed to continually pushing and pulling of financial responsibility. The caveat is, in this community, my experience is they want everything plus one more thing. And you can reduce things. You have to be fiscally responsible on top of that. And you can reduce things as long as it's not impacting my kid. So it really comes back to that philosophy thing. But I will tell you, I think we have a board right now that really wants to look at how we're funding schools long-term differently than we had in the past. And I'm excited about that. And I think that's one of the reasons that they picked me to be the superintendent, because I told them I will not run in the red. And here's how I demonstrated fiscal responsibility and fiscal stewardship in my last 8 years as being a superintendent. And that's just who I am.
Mhm.
That was a lot, Chris. I'm sorry, but
Dr. Montgomery, yeah, Dr. Montgomery, I have a question. I think this community has a memory of 2019, 2020 of when we were invited to participate in the facilities plan and hopes and dreams and what would we be. And there are a series of events and discussions, and a number came out that the big list was about a $44 million project, and then COVID hit. So there is a memory in our community that the wish list was a $44 million package, and many of us were quite surprised. What's different now? Is it an entirely different package of projects to do that is entirely different from 4 years ago? Because again, that memory of 44 million is strong in the community.
so I think that it's a different project in that when they started having the conversation, it was focused around health and life safety.
Okay.
So it was a smaller scope in 2019 is the one factor. The second factor is construction in a post-pandemic world is estimated at $500 per square foot. In a pre-pandemic world, when I was in Ohio, and say things are cheaper in Ohio, let's just call it pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
It was $200 per square foot. So we built brand new high school, brand new elementary building, renovated 2 extra buildings, built a new bus garage, did athletic turf for $87 million. At approximately an average cost, and it fluctuated, like if it's a new build versus a renovation, the per square footage fluctuates accordingly, but it was an average of $200 per square foot. Right now, post-pandemic, we're at $500 per square foot.
Okay. Vika, if you'd like to take the last question.
Yeah, just quickly want to make a comment in regards to the memory. I do believe Stephanie and I must have been at the same meeting where we were told that Perkins Will was the architect on record And the architect on record had already picked, I believe, a general contractor or constructing firm. So I remember that exactly the same way. So clarification would be great on that. I actually have a question that does not relate to the referendum. It relates to the Illinois state assessment numbers, and I believe the 2 slides you were showing on the ELA and math. I completely agree that this needs to be seen in the context of the comparison to state average, other high schools that we see ourselves competing with, that we identify as our peers. When I look at the slides, what concerns me a little bit is the downward trend, or actually, I guess, the upward trend in percentage level of the non-meet standard numbers, I believe. So I want to say, I don't know if I remember that correctly, maybe it went from 9 to 15 in math or something like that. But I think we are always, when we hear, oh, our kids have fallen behind in the pandemic, we maybe associate that more with the year 2021, maybe more than the year 2022. And so I guess I was curious in your analysis of these numbers, what you attribute that to. And I don't know what the solution is, because I think in a way the solution is clear, but I guess I'm more wondering about what you attribute that to, that the trend is really seems down rather than upward.
So it is down, and I think I hate to use the pandemic as a reason, because I think people think that's an excuse, and it's not. But when you look at 2022 data, those are our juniors. Those were our juniors in 2022. And then fast forward, what was their high school experience? What was their 8th grade experience? How much of them were remote? How much of them were in masks? And what is the latent impact of that experience for them, of those students that are juniors in 2022? So if the pandemic was March of 2020, so they were freshmen then, right? So their freshman year, their sophomore year were completely obliterated. March on of their freshman year, forgive me.
Yeah.
And then their sophomore year, a wash. Their junior year, we were arguing about masks through at least January, maybe February, where we were in masks, out of masks. So the answer is clear. One, it's not going to be an overnight recovery. You quoted them, right? It went from for math, it went from 9.6 to 15.2. So the partially meet category did go up. And that's why we're doubling down right now on the resources that we're offering kids. The curriculum is getting a careful review to see what needs to be bulked up. But I think we are going to be seeing the effects of the pandemic for years to come. And I don't like to talk about it because that's not an excuse. And I guess the proof of the pudding for my belief that it's not an excuse is that you should take a look at the 5-year strategic plan and see exactly what we're trying to work on with goals, objectives, and strategies, particularly in goal 1, because we are trying to make sure that we have everything in place to provide the recovery that the kids need.
So are those trends similar in comparative peer districts? So let's say Stevenson, New Trier, all those districts that we typically compare ourselves with?
So right now, for math, we're number 3 in the state. So I think Stevenson and New Trier are probably 1 and 2. We jump between those 3 in math every year. So we're hanging with them, and then we're 6 in the state with ELA. I'm really anxious, and they're above us. I'm anxious to see what the shuffle is this year, because we have been laser focused on this, particularly last year in the fall, about are we ensuring that they have everything they need to be able to do well on this one-time test, which sounds horrible because it's not about the test, but we need to make sure they have the skill sets and the preparedness for success on that assessment, because that's how we see how we're competing with our peers.
Yeah, and I can tell you as a parent of a junior, those tests are not being taken seriously, unfortunately. Like in comparison to a standardized test, like the SAT or the ACT, where the students kind of know, oh, I potentially submit that to colleges, like even the science test last week where we got multiple reminders, and rightfully so, the students all are very blasé about it. Yeah.
We are trying with the teachers, the staff, the administration to impress upon the importance of it.
Mhm.
That mindset, that not taking it seriously, puts the whole district and community in a tailspin because they are using those numbers as
Oh,
are
yeah.
to make major educational decisions moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for the answer. Yeah, and it's always good, I think, to really hear your perspective on it, because obviously that has been brought up as a reason to, I want to say from an anti-referendum group, that has been brought up as one of the arguments, right? So it's really good to get your take on this and the context in which it needs to be presented. So
Yeah,
thank you.
those oppositions, the opposition group, I don't know what world we would live in that taking resources away. So if this referendum doesn't pass and we are faced with reducing programming, I don't know what world exists that would increase test scores. Like, so the alternative, if we have to make programmatic structures to keep the building over and we're reducing program and offerings and supports, that's when you're going to see a decrease in test scores, because we're going to have less resources to dedicate to students. And that will be catastrophic, and I'm not being dramatic. So if we lose big and the board decides to not put it up again in November and just pull it out of general funds, the high topic or the high need infrastructure to just keep the building open, we will have to reduce significantly the programs and the offerings for kids. And that will completely derail what we're trying to do in terms of recovery in this post-pandemic world.
But thank you, Dr. Montgomery. A few sobering thoughts there, but you know, we've got so many wonderful opportunities here in our community, and appreciate you just showing us all a number of different issues that are in the school right now. And Bev, if you want to end the recording.